And before we get the meeting started, we do have two new board members tonight. We have two alternate citizen members that was appointed by the mayor and the council, and they'll get introduced tonight. But Tanisha Alvarado and Jamie Constantine, correct? Yeah. So they'll be joining us, and I'll talk a little bit about that during their introduction as well. Amy, you were just buffering and we lost you now.
No. Hopefully Tony's ready.
I'll stop my video and see if that helps.
Okay.
Yeah, that usually does. I'm going to start recording. You guys can go ahead and call the meeting to order.
All right. Welcome to the 18th. Before we begin tonight, just a couple items. So if you want to speak, Stacy and I will keep an eye on who wants to speak. All public comment is going to be at one time before we really get into the business. So, look at, what's on the agenda. So if there's anything that you want to comment on, public comment at that time. And, we keep it to the, 3-ish minutes, just like we do in person, and give your name and address and all that information. Please be muted if you're not speaking. That covers the high points. So, meeting is called to order. And Ray, would you do more of an introduction to our two alternate board members?
I'm going to pull up my agenda real quick just so I can see where we're at. Yes. If the board recalls, a while back, the Common Council had approved having alternate board members serve on boards and commissions for the city. And there's a number of boards and commissions that already had some alternates appointed. And recently the council and the mayor appointed two alternates to our board. The first one that was appointed was Tanisha Alvarado, and then the second is Jamie Constantine. And I'm looking, Jamie's there, I'm sorry. So they're both joining us tonight. And just a little background on the alternate positions. The alternates do not have voting rights unless there is one of the regular board members that are absent. And then one of the alternates will be voting in place of that regular board member. What I would suggest, because we have two of them and we really have to figure out who's going to be voting when there's a vacancy, I would suggest to the board, and you can let me know if you're okay with this, but I would suggest what we can do is just a simple rotation. Like for this first meeting, if somebody's missing, Tanisha was the first alternate that was appointed, so she would be up this meeting if she would be necessary for voting. And then the next meeting would be Jamie, and what Stacy can do is just keep track of that. So we would just alternate that way out of fairness to them and just so they know who is up, if that sounds okay to everybody. So I'm going to turn it over. I'll let Tanisha and Jamie, you can just do a brief introduction of yourself and maybe why you applied to be on the Parks Board. Tanisha, you want to start out? You may.
Hi there. Hey, everybody. Yes, my name is Tanisha, and I have been in Oshkosh for 4 years now. I applied to be on the Parks Advisory Board because, from what I was asked, personally to join because of my strong participation in a lot of the area parks that I visit with my children. And because I'm physically disabled, I also have an inside view of how difficult it can be sometimes to enjoy family times in the park with my kids, with my wheelchair. So I was just hoping that being part of this board, I can hear some of the things that we're working on as a parks committee to enhance our parks for both family settings and for people with disabilities. And I'm just looking forward to being a part of this. And thank you for allowing me to be an alternate.
And Jamie, you want to take the role?
Hi, I'm Jamie Constantine. I am 21 years old. I was born and raised in Oshkosh, but I actually go to school in Georgia, but it's online this year. And I was looking for a way to get back involved with the Oshkosh community. Throughout high school, I volunteered through the health department with the Rethink Youth Coalition, focusing on teen tobacco prevention. Spent a lot of time in the parks doing cigarette butt pickups. And I actually was part of a group that presented to the advisory park board for the tobacco-free parks ordinance. But I just wanted to get involved with the community more, and I'm also interested in going into community development work, and thought that being an alternate on the Parks Board would be a great first step in getting some experience.
All right.
Welcome.
Yeah.
And Amy, if I might suggest, just because we may have some public members attending the meeting to possibly speak on the Lakeshore item. I know that we had normally said during the virtual meetings you would want the public comment up front, but maybe after the presentation and some discussion by the board and Smith Group, you may want to allow this evening more of a little public input. I'll leave that up to you and the board to decide, but that would be my recommendation, just because they may have some questions after the presentation.
We can do that tonight, definitely.
All right, the meeting's all yours, Amy.
All right, well, Stacy, let's do roll call.
All right, Bartelt,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Girth,
Here.
Groyle,
Here.
Hudak,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
Metz,
Here.
Millet,
Here.
Palmieri. The mayor did say she might be joining us a little bit late, so she might be coming in yet. And then we have Alvarado. Am I saying that correctly, Tanisha? Alvarado?
Yes, you're saying
And
that
then,
right.
and then Constantine.
Yep, here.
Thank you.
All right, the November 9th minutes. Any comments, questions?
Nope.
All right. I make a motion to approve the November 9th minutes.
Second.
Devin, was that you that seconded? All right, we will go through roll call because of being virtual, correct, Ray? With approving it? Okay. Bartelt,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Girth,
Aye.
Groyle,
Aye.
Hudak,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Metz,
Aye.
and Millet.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. If there's anyone wants to make public comment now, we can do that now. All right. Yep. Kathy, you can go ahead.
Kathy, you're muted.
Mute. How's that?
There you go. And if you
Better?
could just give us your name and address, please, that'd be great.
Right. I'm Kathleen Propp, 1936 Hazel, and I really appreciate that you were waiving your rules to let us speak afterwards, after hearing the consultant, but I've got another meeting, so that's why I'd like to go now. Thank you. I did watch the November, I'm speaking on the Lakeshore Park Four Seasons building. I did watch the November Parks Board meeting, and I appreciated the consultant's careful approach and recommendations. I like orienting the Four Seasons building along the old fairway to save trees. And personally, I prefer less parking and less asphalt intrusion into Lakeshore Park. As you actually design the Four Seasons building, I suggest two things. Number one, the Four Seasons building should be designed primarily for general community use and secondarily as a rental use for weddings or other private parties. I fear that there will be public resentment if residents perceive that this building is just another private wedding venue in competition with the Waters, the Schurz, Howard, etc. Occasional rentals are fine. And second comment, as one member of the Plan Commission, I'm hoping that the consultant and Parks Board will recommend quality architecture to complement the Oshkosh Corporation building and the new Oshkosh Avenue design standards. To do that, I would suggest using enough Class 1 materials so we can be proud of this building. And thank you for letting me talk right now. And I'll listen a little bit and then I'll log off.
Thank you, Kathy. All right. Any old business? All right, moving on to new business. Lakeshore.
I will, I'll introduce this and I'm going to turn it over to Greg and Lee, who've joined us again from Smith Group. We've been working the last month to really take a look at the site, as Kathy said, to start taking a look at building orientation, look at the different views that the building and the site can offer for the public and the individuals that will be using the facility. And I think Lee and Greg did a good job of walking through some different scenarios to give us an idea on where we're looking at for that the siting of the building. And then we'll get into a little bit of discussion on some of the just the general schematic design so that the board can and the public can give some input to Greg and Lee going forward. So not sure who's going to start it out, but whoever wants to jump in.
I can start it once Lee shares it, I think, right?
And I'll share it once Ray shares it with me.
Should be coming over to you, Lee.
And just kind of while we're waiting, so we'll do a kind of a really quick kind of background on where we've been, I think, since the last board meeting. So a little history lesson, a little process, and then we're going to dive pretty quickly into the current schematic design, kind of where it's at. As Ray said, there are, you know, still early in the process, and there are some places that we're absolutely looking for some feedback, and have a couple things where we may look at a couple different options on some things too. So, but want to at least make sure that you all understand the kind of the story of how we've arrived at where the current schematic design is headed. So it's almost there. Here we go.
You can see that okay?
So I'm Greg, that's Lee. So just think you all met us last time. So yeah, the last meeting we kind of walked through some of the validation and analysis that we went through, which really led to, as was just pointed out, as some refinements to the site plan that looking at existing trees and soils, things like that, that started to move parking into the fairway, get the building a little closer to where it currently is today. So just again, some of the fine tuning that was really what you do between a master plan and getting into real design. Some of the big drivers of the master plan that are pertinent to this, there's really kind of 5 elements which start to become the drivers of the design. The relationship of the building serving the park, that relationship with the water, so that synergy between water, kind of the green park, the blue park, how that dovetails with the neighbors, knowing that this is has this, you know, this park has a community as well as a neighborhood park scale and quality. So making sure that we're being good neighbors, celebrating that arrival experience. Again, the end of Pinocqua, as well as getting there by trail with the Riverwalk as it keeps being added to, and then thinking about the overall fabric of the location of this is very strategic in terms of being able to knit together physically between Lakeshore Park as well as Rainbow, but also again some of the stories, culture, things that we talked about in the master plan. So these are some of the big drivers that we are trying to make sure that we are mindful of as we design in more detail. So moving forward, you know, what do those actually mean in terms of our site? So from a water perspective, it's kind of water plural. There's, you know, the junction of the lake and the river, and really how that's experienced, as well as the lagoon that's adjacent to us. So these are all things that are really factors as we locate the building and design it and think about views, what kind of presence it will have on the Riverwalk, what the experience is from the building, and what do you do with lagoons and pump houses that are going to be nearby and not going anywhere as well. So those are kind of some of the drivers that we look into from a water perspective. You know, from the park itself, you know, the long open views, the fairways, using those to our advantage, and also making sure that, again, they are great views in their own as well. So being, again, what role the building plays, as well as being having the right presence in the park. Thinking about the arrival, there's a bit of drama as you come up Panoka. So what's this sort of new view going to be? How does this street end? It's really sort of evolved with the Riverwalk and some of the road that's been removed for it. How does it tie the two parks together? What's going to replace this building here? All these are things that we're thinking about as we think about what the arrival experience is. Thinking about, again, being a good neighbor, both immediately to our south, but also, as somebody brought up, the Oshkosh Corporation is a new neighbor. So, what is that in terms of their employees, but also the aesthetics? How do we play off of that from a design perspective? These are all factors that we're looking at.
Then one of the things that we're looking at as well in terms of our site analysis is looking both at the 100-year flood level because of what will be the new four-season building's proximity to the water. We've learned through a number of different materials that have been shared with us that currently where the existing maintenance building is on the site, this will be the location where the new four-season building is sited. The current elevation of that building, that slab on grade, is actually 1 foot below the 100-year floodplain. So one of the things that we know that we want to do is raise the new building up to a safe elevation. Right now, we're looking at elevating it about 5 feet above the existing, 5 feet above the 100-year flood level. As part of the site analysis, we're also looking at subsurface conditions where we have stable soil, where we have unstable soil, where we have stable soil, and what that means for the building's design in terms of the structure that it's designed upon. This helps inform the building design in general.
So really turning that analysis into some of the design drivers. So this is kind of turning the corner into what they become as guiding principles. So these are really the things that we use to define the design, but also evaluate it, whether we're achieving it. So again, those analysis of things that I brought up, water becomes embrace the water. And that's, again, the lake, the river, the lagoon, as well as stormwater is, again, being a good neighbor from an ecology perspective. Serving the park, so that's really, so physically, that's sort of the blue arrows, that relationship with you in the water. Serving the park, thinking of sort of the other side of this building, kind of the yin yang of the blue and the green of its role, serving both parks, and again, thinking about, I think was brought up, that balance between the visitor, the casual visitor, the program visitor, the four seasons, again, that the building will provide. Thinking about, again, celebrating that arrival experience. That's both Panoka and the Riverwalk, the future pier that's in the master plan, thinking about how you walk here, drive here, bike here, and making that, again, a great experience for the user, as well as the statement that the building and the park makes from that perspective. Thinking of it in a way that really does stitch things together, and both in terms of what's been built, but what will be built in the future. And then being a good neighbor to our folks to the south as well, respecting views and noise and traffic, and things that we've been trying to do through the validation, but continue to do with our design refinements. And then that really led to kind of the next step into actually getting into design and where we locate buildings and plazas. These were kind of 3 big drivers that we took from those 5. So celebrating arrival talks about how this building interacts with Panoka in terms of its presence, as well as things like plazas. How do you get there? What do you do? Do you wait for a ride? How do you get to the building from the road? Things like that. Engaging the water has a similar response in terms of its views, things like a deck. And again, what's the indoor-outdoor experience there, as well as serving the park. So really you start to get into the idea that there's a building with different plazas and views and decks, things like that all start to have a little bit different role, different character, different program, but they all need to be stitched together as one design, which has really became our mission here. So doing all of that, we had looked through a series of different alternatives of what the building could look like, the site, how that could all work. We settled on this general idea, which is, again, one step further from the last time we saw you, which was The idea of a drop off at the end of Pinoqua with the parking lot roughly in the fairway alignment with an egress or an exit that would leave the parking lot, and then the idea of a building that was a very compact, simple floor plate of a building with generous outdoor space around it, so the building could flow out, sort of ebb and flow with the size of events or just everyday use. So the idea of decks and plazas around it as well. Also thinking about future things like the spray ground as well as the pier and how it interfaces with the Riverwalk. So this was the general arrangement of the site that we settled on to start getting into more detail.
Now, this is very conceptual, but a few different concepts were presented for a building party that combined the main program elements of the Four Seasons building. There will be an open air deck that will wrap a portion of the building. There'll be an assembly room, building support space, which would include indoor access restrooms, a warming kitchen, mechanical room, and storage room. Then this green block are exterior accessed restrooms, and then looking at outdoor space that could be provided by the building as well by perhaps some large overhanging spaces. Now, as Greg said, this of the few concepts that were presented previously, the preferred concept showed more of a compact program. It's really identified as an open use space. So this kind of outdoor terrace area, sandwiched between a shared core, which again is this kind of these support spaces and the exterior access restrooms, the assembly room, and then the deck. So in general, if you just kind of keep this general concept in mind as we move forward, so open use, kind of public access, outdoor space, thank you, shared core, and then what would be the rentable portion of the building, which would be on the faced towards the water, which you'll see in a few slides coming up.
Well, and think of that rentable blob as sort of an overlay. So think the entire thing is really an open use facility, but the enclosed rentable piece is where you might have that additional ability to rent it. But I would say it's an overlay of a overall open use facility here. So this is kind of putting that all together. This was a version of what I think you saw in your board packets. So this is the overall site plan, kind of refined from what you saw earlier in the slideshow. So locating, again, the drop off. We'll get into more detail, zoom in on this, but this just gives you an overall orientation of where the drop off is, the parking lot. Again, we took great care to think about where existing trees were. So that really became a lot of the form for the parking and drop off and driveways was really driven by where we had large groves of trees, where we could keep those, where we could then augment them with more, which really gave us a nice form. It actually works well functionally, but it also does a nice job of knitting it in and maintaining that buffer with the neighbors. And then again, locating the building, which we'll get into more detail, where it dovetails with both the river and some of the plazas around it. Thinking about accessibility, thinking about different ways to get to the building, and thinking about, again, additional pieces like the spray ground down the way. So maybe getting into more detail. And then I guess the next slide goes back to those guiding principles that, again, making sure that we're always holding ourselves accountable to these, we, again, embracing the water, serving the park, celebrating that arrival, and again, being a good, respectful neighbor here. So getting into a little greater level of detail, and I'm going to go kind of quickly through this and kind of show you how this works. But this is the overall site plan around the building. So, driving up Pinoqua, there's a drop off that is, it serves a couple of purposes, which I'll hit in the next slide. But it is a true drop off, but it also does provide some parking as well. So thinking about, we have fishermen that don't go to the building, they fish along here. So thinking about sort of those uses. So the drop off could double as providing 3, perhaps a few more parking spaces for that, as well as just wanting to drop off at either Lakeshore or Rainbow Park. Generally, you start to see the flow of kind of how cars would move through this lot, as well as generally where the parking spaces would be. Nice relationship of drop off to building, nice relationship of where some of the ADA spaces would be to the building, and ramps that get up to the door. And again, very clean, efficient parking. And then you'll see in the next slide, this works very well also from a service perspective. This starts to illustrate how fire trucks, ambulances, as well as things like trash pickup would also start to use the flow here. So some of the we did some early modeling of fire trucks, and so this larger drop off or aisle that serves the parking lot works very well for fire access and turning those larger vehicles around, where for a typical regular vehicle, car, SUV, the smaller drop off in Pinoco would work just fine. We've started thinking about where trash is going to go, and again, just generally thinking how this works. Looking at pedestrians, cyclists, a hierarchy here, again, tying into the Riverwalk, what's there today and what will be there in the future in blue. And then the rest of the walks and plazas start to show generally where hardscape's going to be, decks, plazas, and then generally the sort of sidewalk connections to all of that really knits us together with the park and parking. And then thinking about materials, we're still working through, we're really early in the process, but generally, this is a park. I think the master plan was very supportive of a more rustic, nature-inspired park. So the idea of using natural materials, stone blocks, things like that can be used for both, hillside retaining, but also can be used for seating and other features. Where we have, we want to have a lot of different ways to get it from an accessibility perspective, but we also might have some direct routes with stairs where those are knit into the landscape. And thinking about, again, those decks and plazas being very flexible outdoor rooms that complement the building, open views. Lee will get into some of the railings and things like that later, but again, a nice blend of natural and open kind of waterfront materials that really celebrates the connectedness to nature. So thinking about plantings themselves, we again are thinking about the overall park and how this site will be the first piece of it, really taking our cues from what would happen here naturally. Some of it is already. So thinking about the natural communities that you would see out here, things like oak savannas, prairies, both wet and dry. Some of the wetter areas, again, are inspired from around the state as well as, again, you would see in this area. So we're starting to think about how these would overlay on the site, and then coming up with very specific plant mixes that would, would be representative in our planting design. So those will be some of the details you'll see in the schematic design, and we'll get into much more detail in design development of the actual, species and size, things like that. But generally trying to really take our cues from nature and start to give back a little bit here as this overall golf course starts to transition back into a larger, more natural park. So this is kind of an indication of how that would look on our site. So, very little lawn. I think we're thinking about lawn as the transition into Rainbow Park and maybe along the trail. The majority of this would be more of a native seed mix. Again, into those different, depending on how wet it is, will dictate what that mix is, but generally thinking, a much more native seed landscape. Where water is intentionally going, we're thinking of a more of a bioswale mix that will take that water, have a little different character, but it's really, think of it as if it was all prairie, that might be a wetter version of that, and you should have a little bit different species mix. And then thinking about where we might have maybe a little more, a better approach that's a little more refined would be really just contained to areas around the ramps in the building where you might have a little higher foot traffic or a little more visibility, but it would still be representative of that broader native landscape that the overall site would have. And then speaking of drainage, starting to think about, again, conceptually here about utilities and drainage, generally where we're going to be tying in terms of feeds off the street, in terms of gas, water, power, things like that. Lee mentioned the idea of elevating the building 5 feet. So this starts to show that idea, where that footprint of the grading might be. With that comes the ability to get to the building, which is, we want to do at a very approachable slope, less than 5% to meet ADA. without railings, and again, feeling like a natural approach, but also celebrating a bit of the drama coming up to the building, thinking about where water is going to go. And again, kind of early, but the idea that maybe the plaza and the building are going towards some infrastructure that we would put in terms of bioswales and detention that would go towards the existing lagoon. And that would be, and then the parking lot and drop-offs would likely go towards some of the golf course water features as well. And then making sure that we don't just put it in there and we really want to use nature here. So we're trying to run it through landscapes from a filtering perspective for supporting that landscape, but also thinking about where we might want to have, again, some bioswales and a little more capacity where we know water is going to go. So it's stored, it's treated, it's released slowly, and it has all those benefits for the rest of the park. And then when you put it all together, this is kind of what the site plan looks like. Again, a little more detail, just zooming in on the building. You start to see some of the, again, where you might have some stairs, where you'd have ramps, what's paved, what's natural. And Lee will get into a little more around the building, but we're starting to illustrate here where you would see, pavement on grade would be the terrace, what's labeled terrace and plaza, and where you would have actually an elevated deck is labeled deck. And that all, these are all, again, really think about them as spill up rooms from the building itself. And then one thing we're starting to think about that is not in this phase is, and there's still some more detail. We're working with Ray and his team in terms of what the spray ground will be down the line, what size it is, how it's going to work. That has some implications of where service goes and things like that. But generally, we're thinking that a quadrant of this plaza would be dedicated towards that spray ground. We are designing this, again, some of this effort is also we have a cost estimation portion of our scope. We're going to look at what all this costs, but right now we're thinking the plaza is likely going to be a future phase, but we want to make sure we design it now, how big it's going to be, grade it, make sure we know, what paths are going to connect to it so that it's a nice, easy piece to plug in when the funding is there for the spray ground. But if the funding is there to build part of the plaza, we'll try to get as much as we can in at this point. But so that's part of our effort here. Is there may be some pieces you see in schematic that may become future phases the next time we're in front of you. The plaza would be one of those.
All right, so zooming back out a little bit again, just to put everything back in context, you can see.
Hey, Lee.
Yep.
Lee, can you maybe a little closer to your mic? You seem a little bit quieter. Thanks.
Sure. Sorry. Is that better? Yeah. All right. So zooming out a little bit and just showing again, looking at the context of the site and the site's relationship to the building. What we start to do is identify the primary, what we're envisioning being the primary gathering areas of the building. So this outdoor terrace, the outdoor deck, and the indoor assembly room being those three primary gathering areas. And we'll keep on revisiting these areas throughout the remainder of the presentation. But what we start to do is, once we understand where those gathering areas are, start to think about the views that are achieved from each one of those spaces. Now, one of the things that we think is important to try to achieve is create this idea of kind of an equal democratic space. So right now, if you remember the diagrams that I had shared before, where this essentially this blue area of the floor plan is that rentable space. The terrace was that open use space, and then you had your shared core area. What we're trying to do is understanding that this building will be in a public park setting. There was a comment earlier that, if the building is rented, we want to make sure that the general public has the ability to also have water views, also have these park views from the raised platform. So basically have the same view sheds that people that are renting both the assembly room and the deck would have. So what we try to do is we've tried to orient the outdoor spaces to achieve water and park views, very similar to what this rentable the rentable space of the building would achieve as well. So trying to take everybody into account, whether you're renting the building or not renting the building. And I'll just quickly touch on Greg has mentioned a couple times the arrival views. So you've got direct views. If somebody's waiting for their parents to pick them up, for example, that are hanging out under the terrace, they've got direct views of the drop-off area. So we made sure not to block this view with anything. You've also got elevated plaza views from the terrace as well. You'll have drop-off views from the assembly room as well to a certain extent, but those primary views will be afforded from the terrace.
These are also all views to the building as well, so they're two directional. So we're thinking about both of those, what it's like when you're there, but also I think somebody brought up the architectural character. What those views all do different things from a design perspective that Lee will start to touch on here a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. So we start to look at those gathering areas and developing a floor plan around that. So what we have here is the assembly room, the indoor accessed restrooms that would service the assembly room, the warming kitchen, storage and mechanical room, and then a deck that in this version at least is wrapping on two sides of the building, and then this outdoor terrace space. One thing that we're considering exploring is wrapping the deck on three sides and having your primary point, or you're having two primary points of access here and here. We think that there are benefits and downfalls to both options, so option 1 and option 2. But we're at a point where we're kind of in an exploratory phase of design right now, and we're trying to weigh the benefits of this option versus the other option. This is just one aspect of the design that we're looking at and exploring right now.
If I can just jump in real quick, because I want to make sure the board members are taking a look at that and giving some thought to it as you come back to getting some input from them, and as you further explain some of the pros and cons of each of those. So something that the board members should probably make note of.
Sure, thanks. So again, coming back to these three primary gathering spaces, if you think about the arrival sequence, so you get dropped off and you've got multiple points of access up to this elevated terrace. So you can come directly from the drop off up these landscaped stairs. You can come from the parking lot up the ramp, or through the plaza up this stairs. And they're all going to bring you to this kind of primary point here, which gives you a number of different options of where is your destination from here? Is it the assembly room? Is it the deck? Or is it the terrace? And you start to think about, well, if this is your landing point for all three means of entrance kind of into this terrace, what does this space want to feel like? How do you pitch the roof? How do you make this feel? If there is a roof overhang here, which we're starting to imply with this dash line, what's the character of that roof? How does it welcome you into the space? If we do end up moving forward with the deck where it's only got one primary point of access back here, how do we make sure that we design the building in such a way that this roof, this overhanged roof, kind of welcomes you and draws you into this space, and therefore allows you to, if it brings you through the terrace, that allows you to experience different views of the park So you can imagine coming up here, walking across here, and then getting a window to the lake and to the north from here that you otherwise wouldn't achieve if you didn't kind of traverse through the terrace area here.
So that's one of the factors of the wraparound deck is there's a sort of a bit of mystery and rewards you for that discovery, but it also there's something very obvious about the decision point at the door. So that's one of the the big pros and cons there.
Yep. So what we're going to do in the next couple of slides is try to put you in each one of these destination spaces. So we've started to pull images of spaces that we feel could be, this space could have a similar feel to something like this, where you would look down upon the plaza. Again, you would look north to the park. You would look north to the water. One of the considerations of this terrace design is potentially incorporating an outdoor fireplace out here that could be used obviously in the cooler months, and perhaps there's an opportunity to put one here, and then likewise on the other side on the rentable portion of the program, perhaps there's an opportunity to place something in this corner here. Again,
I'm sorry. When you say here, I don't know. I can't see what you're pointing at. So I'm
I'm
could
sorry.
you
Can you
be
guys
a little
you can't see my mouse?
No, not really. Or Jake's really fast. I'm sorry. It's not
Okay.
clear to me. Maybe it's just me.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I don't know how else to. So I guess I'll explain if you're not able to see my mouse. So do you see the room that says storage/mechanical? So on the wall that faces the plaza, so what we could envision doing is placing a fireplace on that wall. So on the terrace side that opens up to the terrace, but on the exterior wall of the storage mechanical room, there could be a fireplace there. And then similarly, on the opposite side where the warming and kitchen room is, there could be an opportunity to place something similar on that exterior wall that faces the rentable portion of the deck. Does that make sense? And then starting to look at, how this assembly room could feel. And, full disclosure, this rendering that you see here is not intended to represent this project. This was not created for this project. It was basically just intended to show what this space could feel like. We would envision this as being a column-free, open, airy, voluminous space filled with natural light that, again, is kind of welcoming and somewhere where you'd like to spend your afternoon, and somewhere that is desirable to rent for. It could be a wedding, it could be an office function, any kind of gathering. And again, some of the primary views that are afforded from this assembly room, obviously direct views of the water, and then you're going to have direct views of the park as well. Then we're starting to look at ways that, starting to explore maybe flexibility of use for between the assembly room and the deck that's attached to it, and potentially looking at operable partitions, large glass openings that could be folded and fully open. So it starts to blur the line between what is inside and what's outside. By doing that, you really start to, it gives you an opportunity to kind of flex between spaces, both indoor and outdoor spaces. So you can imagine if there's a small art gallery show, for example, there could be standing height tables around the, kind of scattered around the interior space of the assembly room. as well as on the deck outside as well. It really gives you the opportunity to really increase your capacity, if you will. There will be a defined occupant load that the assembly room can serve. But that doesn't mean that, by opening up that assembly room function to this deck outside, it does allow you to have more occupants, more people that can participate in a certain function. And then lastly, looking at the wraparound deck. So what we would be looking at, Greg mentioned the railings earlier. I think this image in particular conveys a style of railing that we would be looking to incorporate into this design. Something that's simple, classic, modern, and minimal. And the idea here being that, if you're coming to the deck in the afternoon, you're coming to relax, watch the sunset, look at the, hang out, watch the water, look at the park. If you're sitting down, table and chairs, we don't want the railing to really obstruct your view. So by incorporating a cable railing such as this, you really, again, it's minimizing the obstruction to the park, minimizing the obstruction to the views, and likewise for the people that will be on the path, which is just to the north here. Looking up to the deck and being able to see the building, be able to see the people hanging out on the deck as well. Now, the next couple of slides, I'm going to start talking about some of the passive design strategies that we're looking at incorporating into this building. These are going to be design drivers and project goals that will inform our design. We'll start to mold the building form, but just understand that what we're showing you here on the right-hand side, this is not intended to be the end result of the building. It's really just shown here for diagrammatic purposes. But looking at passive heating and sun control, so how are the overhang designed so that the winter sun is let in the winter, allowing your floor slab to heat up and then passively release that heat once the sun goes down. And again, designing these overhangs or any kind of other shade devices, though it also blocks that direct summer sun, thereby reducing your cooling loads in the summer months. And again, some of the project benefits of looking at solar design and locating and sizing windows throughout the building, taking advantage of daylighting and cutting down on the need and the use for electric or your electric light. And by incorporating both these things, you're cutting down, like I said, on your energy use in general. And then starting to look at natural ventilation and cooling as well. So in this diagram in particular, we're showing a clear story window up here. Now, and then we're showing windows that are directly, or openings that are directly across from one another. Now, if these are operable windows in both locations on both sides of the room, having those openings be open across from one another promotes this natural ventilation of the space. And then any hot air that does accumulate in the building, if these clear story windows are operable, or if there is a passive way to ventilate the hot air through a series of louvers that could be incorporated to this upper space, it allows you to, again, take advantage of prevailing winds and natural cooling, and therefore cutting down on your energy use as well.
Are you going to try solar panels?
I would. It's a consideration. We have not explored that option at this time.
Okay.
And then looking at the last passive design strategy here is stormwater management, and looking at ways to, this is more kind of building and site integration. So looking at ways that we can drain the water from the roof and then direct it through a series of gutters, maybe to a single kind of exit point or point where it can expel. And this arrow here that's pointing directly down, this could be a feature. This could be a rain chain. We could orient, or we could design the landscape so that the water drains down here to a stormwater detention pond, which was shown in a number of different site plan images previously.
So that's kind of part of that embracing and celebrating the water versus just putting it into a gutter and a pipe. And again, that could be something that is beneficial to that native landscape that we put in, I talked about earlier.
Yep. And you can imagine that during a rain event, if people will be drawn to this area of the terrace, so this covered area of the terrace, and by embracing that water, by collecting it in a series of gutters and directing it to a single point, this point becomes something special. You're not trying to hide, you're not trying to bury the water. This could really become a cool feature by some really simple design moves, to be honest. And again, it's kind of it's making simple design moves to embrace and react to what's already there on the site, and sun paths, prevailing wind, rainfall, and how does the building and the site design react to each one of those things, until ultimately it starts to inform the general design and massing of the building in particular. And you start to see all of these ideas kind of coming together in this slide. So you're looking at the stormwater management design strategies for the site, so directing water runoff to a series of these detention ponds or bioswales. And then you can see this arrow right here that's coming off the building. That's tied primarily into this diagram and the image that I shared in the previous slide. And in this stormwater management strategy, how does building and site, how do both of those kind of work with one another? And then again, showing the passive heating, sun control and daylighting, and then natural and passive cooling. So the last couple of images were purposefully diagrammatic. Those were design drivers that are helping to inform the project. Now we're coming back to our project site in particular. And for the purposes of, for the next couple of slides where we're doing a sun study, we're just looking at a flat roof for the purposes of this study. It's really looking at, the sun's path in both, really throughout the year. So summer solstice to winter solstice, and also factoring in the two equinoxes that fall, that will be in the midpoints of these two paths. And what we start to learn from looking at the sun's path, both the winter, the equinoxes, and the summer solstice, is where is shade, where is shadow, which portions of the building, which facades are in direct sun all year round, and how does that inform shading strategies for both the outdoor spaces like the terrace, but also shading strategies for windows that may be along the facade that has the orange line on it. So you start to see during the winter solstice, the deck to the north of the building in particular is in complete shade. During the equinoxes, it's in partial sun, and in the summer solstice, it's in almost complete direct sun. Again, considering a flat roof for the purposes of this study. You also start to see that the terrace is in direct sun, full sun, all year round. So what that starts to tell us is really you want to start considering perhaps some kind of shading option by potentially a roof overhang for that terrace to give people that are, that want to hang out on the terrace a little bit of maybe reprieve from the direct sun during the summer months. And again, coming back to these three primary gathering areas and how that shade and sun analysis informs each one of these spaces. So I said previously that the facade that's highlighted with the red box there, that facade in particular is in full sun all year round, as is the outdoor terrace space. So that begins to tell us that exterior shading of the glazing is highly recommended on the facade where that red box is, and some kind of shading is highly recommended for the terrace area. And then also looking at the spaces that are either in partial sun or indirect sun, we would consider shading the deck optional, to be honest. Depending on when you are on that space or when you're hanging out on that space, you may be in sun, you may be in shade. You also, in the spring and in the fall, you have the opportunity to, half of the deck would be in shade, half of it would be in sun. So you can kind of easily flow between. You have an easy decision without having to add anything else in terms of a roof overhang or a gazebo or some kind of a sun shading device. And then for the facades that are shown in blue here that are in indirect sun, we would say that adding shading devices or designing the roof overhangs to provide shade in the summer would be optional as well. So you start to, again, what's shown here, this is really a 3D extrusion of the floor plan that was shared earlier in the presentation. And you start to see how the north and the east sides of I guess the northeast side and the northwest portion of the assembly room has these kind of large glassy openings. And again, thinking of those operable partitions that could fold and would provide kind of a large opening and kind of freely flow in between indoor-outdoor space. And on the southeast side, you start to see smaller openings, areas that we want to control the sun primarily. And then the dashed line around the terrace is meant to convey that we're looking at a portion at least of this area, designing this with a roof overhang again to kind of provide that shade and that shelter from the sun, from the rain, etc. And then this is just one concept about taking everything that I just mentioned in terms of passive design strategies, as well as taking the sun paths into account, and how all of that together starts to inform what this building wants to be, where we have glazing, what the size of that glazing, is it directly off of the the assembly room, do we have clear story windows? Where are roof overhangs? Where are kind of our outdoor sheltered spaces? Looking at these outdoor sheltered spaces as, the outdoor room, as Greg had mentioned before. And then looking at this particular concept from various points in the site. So this perspective would be the view from if you're driving north up Panoqua, before you get to the drop-off. This is the view that you would see of the building. And I spoke previously about the arrival point. If you're traversing one of the two staircases or coming up the ramp, it kind of brings you to the main entry point of the building. What does that main entry point want to feel like? And you can start to see that with the picture of the roof in this particular concept, it's this kind of idea of large, kind of welcoming, kind of cathedral ceiling, if you will. It kind of welcomes you into this outdoor terrace space. And then this would be the view. So if you park your car, you can see the ramp, the two vertical lines that are directly in front of you. That's the ramp leading up to the upper terrace. You can see the staircase on the left, that's accessed directly from the plaza. You've got your outdoor access restrooms, and your primary point of access to the deck, which is shown on the left, and your primary point of access to the assembly room, which is shown in the double doors to the right. And then looking at a view, what the view could look like if you're on the trail. So, how do we sculpt the landscape here? So that the building almost looks like it's propped up, and then, you've got kind of a light touch directly around the building of this deck that are on a series of what would be small columns. And again, the railing, it's a poor choice for this rendering, but this railing would be much more transparent that is currently shown. Then starting to think about materiality for the building in general. So what's shown here is we'd be looking to incorporate something very similar as is shown here, that this kind of combination, this material palette of wood siding, whether it's concrete, whether it's stone, and then your primary structural elements being steel is the thought right now. And the thought here is to build on the site materiality. So looking at natural materials, how do we incorporate concrete, stone, wood into the material palette, and then tie it all together by, again, that kind of a series of having steel being your primary structure for the building. And then with that, I think that brings us to our last slide. This shows, again, where we're at in terms of our current building floor plan, as well as our current thoughts on site design, and how both site and building integrate with one another, hopefully relatively seamlessly. So with that, we'll conclude our presentation. And Ray, I don't know if we'll hand it back over to you or if we'll open it up for comment. I'll let you handle that.
Yeah, I think Amy, if you'd agree, we'll open it up to some initial comments and thoughts from anything that the board has. Any questions? And again, this is a lot of good background, I think, from Lee and Greg as to why they're looking to position the building in a certain way, to have the deck in a certain area and so forth. So you let me know how you want to proceed.
Yes, I think questions, comments from the board would be good at this time.
Lori Palmieri. Thanks for that presentation. I think I came in a little bit after you started. Just kind of wanting to understand, and maybe you already said this, so with the natural cooling, this would have no need for air conditioning, correct?
No, I wouldn't go that far. The passive cooling is a strategy to help reduce your cooling loads. It's not intended to completely replace air conditioning, and likewise the passive heating that I spoke of before that slide as well. The passive heating strategy is also not intended to fully replace active heating. It's really meant to reduce those loads in general.
I see. And then just a quick follow-up. Is there a thought that the roof material might be metal? Did I catch that, or did I just think that?
No, the thought right now is that we would look, we're considering a standing seam metal roof for the project.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And so, this is Becky Metz. So, what are the negatives with the deck wrapping around all of the other sides?
So let me go back.
Because it seems, since those windows are so small on that side, it seems like a deck would be good.
So one of the considerations of having the deck wrap around. So the thinking right now is that the deck that is not surrounded by the heavy dashed line, that portion of the deck would, if the assembly room was rented, the deck to the north would also be rented. The deck that is shown to the south, the idea is that would be, in general, kind of open use and would not necessarily be reserved for anybody that's renting the assembly room. So one consideration, I guess one potentially negative thing to consider, if you have a deck on that side and you saw the renderings of having windows along that southeast facade, if that portion of the deck is open use and somebody is renting that assembly room for, let's just say it's a wedding for the purposes of conversation, you're going to have the general public traversing back and forth. Depending on how many people are in the park that day and how popular the park is, you have the potential for people to walk back and forth and see into the assembly room, and therefore it limits the amount of privacy that you have into that room. Now, one thing to consider is that this building will be in a public park, so you're not going to get complete privacy ever. There will be some level of transparency there, regardless of how hard you try. But that's just one consideration with the deck of, having this deck be open use and having a wraparound on that face in particular is the potential for, the general public to kind of view into the assembly room space.
Can you have windows? Can't you have windows where the people can see out, but the people cannot see in? Like the film kind of stuff over the windows?
Yeah, there's technology and blinds, and as Lee said, obviously, if you rent this building, you're in a park, so seeing people does come with that. So it's not the only negative. Again, obviously, it's more deck. There's a cost, and I think trying to weigh, where we put our dollars is one thing. I think also visibility. Driving up, you're sort of, there is some aesthetic there looking at the underside of the deck from driving up, and there's, that's one aspect of it. There's also, I think, as Lee pointed out, there is what we've been toying with, there is something really nice about that discovery process of finding that way to the deck, of going to that sort of point that Lee had pointed out where you're overlooking the lagoon and the park and then going further to the deck. So, the pro of having that obvious connection is there, but the negative is it's almost too obvious and it's right in your face. So there's something kind of nice about the deck being in the park versus on the road. And it's really a nicer view, kind of the angle that it's drawn in the base, where that deck facing the road isn't quite, it's in, open sun. It's not, it just has a different character. That's why we're kind of weighing both right now. There's, almost equal pros and cons to it.
That makes sense. Yep.
This is Deb Martin. I have questions related to the kitchen and the bathrooms. The kitchen does not look like a very good location for anyone serving. There's no serving from the kitchen. Everything has to be carried in and out of that kitchen. So from a person who's served a lot of different events, that doesn't seem very, very helpful. What is the size of those bathrooms? How many stalls? Is it a one at a time bathroom?
No, there's two fixtures for each restroom. So two water closets. So for the women, there are two water closets. One ADA, one standard. And then for the men, there's an ADA water closet and a urinal in both the indoor and outdoor restrooms.
And is it, maybe I heard this wrong, I may have misunderstood, but there's a baseball diamond at the other existing park right now. And was it said that these restrooms would also serve the people that are at that place?
Partially. I think, Ray, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, I thought there were also dedicated restrooms that are around Rainbow Park as well.
There's restrooms further to the north by the boat launch. But Deb, that's the reason why we are showing the exterior access as well. So there's, from the interior, you'll have two restroom water closets, and then on the exterior restroom, there'd be an additional two in each, the men's and the women's.
So my question is, I'm just not sure if that's enough. I mean, at any given time, depending on, and is there a way that the interior ones can be used by the exterior entrance, except when the assembly room is rented, as a way, I've seen that in, I don't know, I guess the county fair. They have, I don't know. I'm just asking that question.
This is designed that way correctly. If the assembly room is not rented, both sides of the restrooms are accessible from the exterior.
Yes.
Because then we just lock off the restroom door going to and from the assembly room.
Okay. It looked like a solid wall, but I know this is just a diagram.
No, Deb, you're correct that it is shown as a solid wall right now, but Ray, you're also correct that the intent was to provide a door in between both the indoor and the outdoor restrooms. So in between that dividing wall, so that the restrooms could serve. So basically, each restroom could have 4 fixtures accessed from the exterior, but the door leading into the assembly room from the restrooms would be locked and inaccessible to users during a non-rentable event.
Sure. One more question about the railing around the deck. I understand to make it look nice, but also my concern would be that it's to code as safety for children.
We would not.
It would be. Yeah, it would be the openings. We use the sort of the pop can standard of how wide the openings are, so it would be sized to make sure that it meets those codes.
Thank you.
And this is Lori Palmieri again. Just a question regarding the restrooms, and maybe this might be a further discussion or a discussion that's already been had by the board. We're talking about gender-specific restrooms. And I'm curious as to, you know, are more public spaces starting to look at unisex, undesignated gender restrooms?
I'm sorry, is your question, should we rename our restrooms from gender specific to more gender neutral?
Yes.
Is that a question to Greg and I?
It's a question as to, are you seeing that? And also, I think for the board, has that conversation been held as to, you know, new park facilities, public facilities?
I mean, I can answer the question that yes, we are seeing that. I think that's a legitimate consideration for really the board to help us understand how to need.
Thank you.
So this Deb Martin, I would second that we have, I don't know, we've talked about it, but it seems you'll often see even a family restroom. So a parent can go in to a single room with 2 children or something. And also, is there a changing table in any of these restrooms for small ones?
We would provide a table. Yes, we would provide that. It's not shown right now in the process, but public parks have, we would.
And I guess not to get into, I guess, you know, we'll definitely take this input as we look at things, but I also think the more I would say gender neutral restrooms, it may change some of the fixture count and arrangement, right? In terms of if they all were neutral versus, I've also seen them where maybe one is and one isn't, or I've seen different combinations with families. So we're seeing a lot of those, and sometimes it comes down to how many you want to have. And you know, because if it's sometimes a gender neutral won't have 2 fixtures because it's you know, you lock the door behind you kind of thing too. So you know, if that's a direction that you want to go, it may start to dictate some tweaks to the floor plan here, but it's definitely something we're encountering.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Any other board member comments?
This is a Deb Martin again. Sorry. Is it about 60 parking spaces in the parking lot?
It's 81, which
81.
includes the drop-off spaces. So that's roughly what we had in the master plan. So it's serving the building as well as providing some park service to, again, you know, the Ball Diamonds Trail, things like that. The building is easier to calculate. The park is a little harder sometimes, you know, but we're trying to find a balance where it's not too many, but it's doing, you know, it's doing double and triple duty here.
Lee, can you speak to the assembly room capacity limit that we're at currently with the design? Because I know it's gone down a little bit considering what we have to work with.
Yep, we're now, which equates to about 1,500 square feet of space for the assembly room.
So I could see, and we'll work with planning a little more on it, but just, you know, let's just say it was, you know, 2 per car coming to an event here, you know, maybe 50 of those cars or more for the building and 25 to 30 are for the site, but that could ebb and flow depending on the event. But, you know, it's a good rule of thumb just to kind of see that it's, you know, is it a reasonable, parking size for the program here. It feels about right. But it's also something that we will be looking a little more closely at, talking to the city with different codes, things like that too, and also looking at budget as well. We wanted to, at least this was the same program from the master plan that we were trying to achieve.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Deb Martin again. Another question. The rental space, is there a chance, Ray, that there will be times where it'll be a community event in that space, not being rented, but something the city is putting on?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would see some of our programs being in there, some smaller type events that we put on, some smaller type events that the community might want to put on there. So yes, definitely.
This is Jamie Constantine. I was wondering if you can go back to the sunlight diagram. I had a question about if there was a terrace. If there was that wraparound deck, would that wraparound portion of the deck during the winter be the only place that had like full direct sunlight then, part of the deck?
The terrace could.
Could, but the deck southeast shade facade, so it probably in this the stop on this. Oh, shoot, sorry. There's a delay on my end. Apologize. Can you guys see the site plan enlargement slide right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So because we know that we want to provide shade to the windows on this southeast side of the building, it would probably make the most sense to completely cover that portion of the deck that would wrap around that side with that roof overhang. Just so you wouldn't have basically.
We may have lost Lee. You also though would have a lower sun angle too, so you might get it might be a little sunnier. Even if it had the canopy over it, it would be sunnier. Probably the sunniest of the decks, let's put it that way, because of the orientation and the sun angle in the winter.
Okay, thank you.
Lee just popped back in and I had to give him the presenter screen again. So I think if we give him about 30 seconds maybe, but. Any other questions from board members or any clarification, any direction that you want to provide?
This is Lori Palmieri. I just want to say that I love what I've heard so far. One of the questions that I had was going back to the discussion about the outdoor fire pit, which I think is an extremely cool feature. But Ray, I'm also wondering, there's a large outdoor fire pit at the Culver Family Welcome Center on campus. And I'm just wondering, would there be any value to checking in with them about how much it gets used?
Are you referring to the gas one that's out front there, Mayor?
Yes.
I can check, and Lee and Greg, you can clarify for me, but I think you were thinking it might be a natural fireplace out in that area, or what were your thoughts?
It could be either. We've done them both. I know it's really either. It's kind of up to you from an O&M perspective. If we're running gas, the building, it could be a gas fireplace. I think we were looking at the orientation of the building does give you some pretty good protection from wind, so it may be more viable for a natural wood one from that perspective too, though. So could be an owner's choice.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, we can look at that. My only concern is I don't know how heavily rented that facility is, or if they're renting it, are they actually using some of that outdoor space, where I would foresee ours possibly being used for some of the events that our department might offer as well. And we've seen them before, and Chad, you can chime in too, but I think Waukesha County Parks have been doing a number of their facilities, including stuff like these, and we've seen them around the state, so we can do some checking with some of our colleagues as well.
And then just one follow-up. I'm not sure if I completely understood, but is the deck and the interface from the assembly room thought to have like an ability to open up? If I understood the description earlier, it almost sounded like seasonally it could be the interior space opened up to the deck. I don't know if I heard that correctly or not.
Yes, that is correct.
Yep.
I think the rendering that they're showing gives a couple examples, and it's not the model that we'll go with, but there's different options out there that they can explore as well. But I think it really opens up the space. Again, if we have a capacity limit of 100 inside the assembly space, by opening up that deck space, allows a little larger capacity as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, this is Deb Martin again. I'm really happy to see that you're showing overhang or of force partial shade on different parts of the deck. So I think that's, I'm kind of saying that's a good thing. I can't speak for anyone else.
I'll do a last call for some comments from any board members yet.
I just had one question about the transition from the terrace to the deck on the far side of the building. How do you anticipate closing that off for events? How will that be, access denied, controlled for that kind of thing?
I mean, it could be as straightforward as it could be a gate it's simply, an operable gate there that is it wouldn't be lockable because it would need to be accessible for egress. You need to be able to exit out of there. Greg, I know you've worked on similar projects in the past.
It could be as simple as a sign that says event on the deck too. It depends on the operation of the event, but I don't think it has to be any. It's not about security. It's just about kind of trying to keep clarity. So I think it could be as simple as a sign on a post or something like that. It could be a simple rope or chain, or it could be a gate. I think that's something we could work with Ray on, depending on the gate. But I would say probably I would err on the simple side. It doesn't want to come off as a a private enclosure. It just wants to be clear to the public and where there's an event going on, just so it all works well.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just want to say I think this is really neat design. If you were asking me specifically, I like the idea of not having the deck wrap around. I like the idea of the approach and what you're saying, but that just is one voice. So
thanks.
Thank you.
I just wanted to echo that everything looks super great so far, and I'm excited to see what's next.
Me too.
That's a good way, I think, for Lee and Greg. You want to kind of jump into what's next for us?
Turn it off.
Yeah, so I think what's next is we're at a point now where we are wrapping up our schematic design phase of the project. We will essentially turn the presentation that you just saw into a schematic design report. And then once we give that to Ray, that will close out our schematic design portion of the project. And the next phase is called design development, and that's really design development is really where we start to kind of get more into the details. We start to get more refined into the design's development. So both the design of the building and the design of the site. I think what we've tried to convey in this presentation are a lot of the drivers that we are considering for this project and why we think that they're good solutions for this site in particular. And now that we know what those drivers are, we're going to, you know, those not only those drivers, but also those goals that we want to achieve for the project, and allow those drivers and those goals to really help inform where the design goes from here. I think what we've tried to do is convey where our head is currently at in terms of both site and building design, and now it's really starting to get into the details of what both of those are individually and how both of those designs work together as one holistic design for this project.
Well, and really getting the more detail of the materials, you know, picking, when we say it's stone, what kind of stone, those sorts of things as well too. So it's really the next step towards building it. Also, you know, validating, refining the budget, you know, some of the things I talked about with phasing, decide whether they will be in or not as well, but a lot more into the actual materials, sort of CAD, more, you know, much more hardline drawings and getting into the, you know, starting to specify, you know, systems and real materials too.
Yeah, and our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and structural engineers will be much more engaged moving forward, and their engagement will help to confirm or, you know, potentially slightly modify some of the room sizes that have been shown in this presentation, but it'll add that level of detail that I guess that comes next, I guess, is to engage those engineers and help their designs inform the architectural design as well of the building.
Hello, I'm sorry, I was trying to talk before. This is Lester, but I was muted. I agree. I just want to chime in. I agree with on not having the deck, not having a full wraparound deck. From looking at all the work that you've done, the views are beautiful of the building from both the trail and driving on up. I think that obviously you're going to want to do those sliding doors because 1,500 square feet isn't really that large of a room. Getting 100 people in 1,500 square feet is a pretty tight fit. So any way to expand that space would be a good idea. And I like the look of it, and I think you guys so far have all done a really good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say one clarification. I think the opening lets you expand your capacity, but it also lets you spread out with a smaller capacity and different experiences too, which is a pretty important thing in the sort of climate we're in at the moment too. So it gives you a whole other dimension, you know, for whatever kind of event you have too. So yeah, I think it's a nice feature that we're seeing in it's a pretty good trend that we're seeing in a lot of facilities like this. What?
All right.
Great feedback.
The other thing, I'll jump in as far as our next step, because I shared with Greg and Lee that after we get through this meeting and we kind of refine the design after your input tonight, I'd like to forward at least that conceptual design up to our engineering and planning staff, just so that they see what we're working towards and see if there's anything that concerns them at this time. So on our end, we'll continue to follow up with other departments as well. If there's nothing else, I'm going to ask Amy to jump back in and take over the meeting. And Greg, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, now we're going to move on to, we discuss and recommend the concession stand agreement at Spanbauer Field first, and then we'll do Red Arrow after that. So do you want to give a little background?
Yes. Yes. This is an agreement that the city has had with the Eagles Club for many, many years. It's an extension of that current agreement, essentially allowing them to offer concessions at the Spanbauer Memorial Field. And in the agreement, it states the rent or the fee due to the city each year. We did have to work with them this year, obviously, due to the COVID situation and the limited number of activities or games, or really no activities or games. So they felt that this time they'd like to do just a 1-year agreement, see how things start to come back next year, and see how the operation goes. So at this time, we're looking for the board to make a recommendation to the council to enter into that agreement.
Great. This is Lori. I'm just wondering, so is the current agreement rent based on a season, or is it per event?
It's based on the season, and it's based on either, and I'll have to pull it up real quick. I've got it minimized.
Ray, it's $1,000 or 10%.
Thank you, Stacy. I just got to that page. So Mayor, it is, states the ability to serve concessions. The Eagles will pay to the city $1,000 or 10% of gross revenues, whichever is greater for the year.
For the year, okay.
Yes.
Do we have other agreements that are per event? Would that, given the uncertainty, would that be something to, I guess, entertain?
I think it's a little difficult to do that just based on right now they're comfortable coming in knowing they'll have it for the entire season, and our department tries to get as many games there as possible. So it's not really based on the number, I wouldn't say events, but it's how many nights they can get the play down there. And that will vary based on weather conditions, cancellations. So it's a little easier to give them those two options, I believe, as far as a set payment or a percentage. And they've been comfortable, very comfortable with that in the past as well.
I see. Okay.
So do we have to have someone recommend?
Yes, we would need a recommendation second and a vote.
I recommend.
Second, this is Deb.
And then this, again, would be a recommendation to the council, and Stacy can do a roll call.
Bartelt?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Dirth?
Aye.
Groyle?
Aye.
Hudak?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Metz?
Aye.
Millet?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
All right, motion passed 9-0.
All right, now we'll move on to the agreement with the YMCA at Red Arrow Park.
This is actually, it's the same agreement, I believe. It's been modeled after that one that we used at Spanbauer. Same thing with the YMCA because of the COVID situation this past summer and no use or minimal use. We are looking at a new agreement with them, and speaking with Angie from the YMCA, she is comfortable recommending going for 2 years. So we'd be looking for a recommendation for 2 years. The lease payment is the same as what we just discussed. It's $1,000 or 10% of the revenue side.
Recommend.
I'll second.
All right, Bartelt?
Aye.
Davis?
Aye.
Dirth?
Aye.
Groyle?
Aye.
Hudak?
Aye.
Martin? Metz?
Aye.
Millet?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Again, motion passed 9-0. Thank you.
All right, now we'll move into staff reports. It looks like Ray, you're up again.
Yep, I'm going to keep it brief. Just 2 items that I wanted to update you on. And the first one is hopefully with this colder weather coming, we're going to be able to have some outdoor ice skating, hopefully in the near future. And if you haven't heard already, what we've done is worked with the Oshkosh Area Community Foundation and the other partners that are involved with the funding for the ice rink. One of the issues that we had behind the convention center at Riverside Park is the amount of pitch in the land that's out there. Although you maybe can't see it with your eye, there's about an 11-inch pitch in that 100-foot area that we had the rink in the past couple of years. And if you can imagine trying to fill a bathtub where one end of the bathtub is 11 inches taller than the other, you can understand the issues that we had there. What that did for us, it required a lot more maintenance, a lot more adjustments to the rink and the sides to make it work there. But then the other issue was in that area where the water depth was so deep, it never really froze. So it was like a floating ice cube in certain areas of the ice rink. And if you get ice moving on that liner, it was damaging the liner too much. So the liner had to be replaced almost annually. And that are the funds that the Community Foundation has received donations for. So we worked with the Community Foundation and actually moved the rink to Rowe Park. The Rowe Park was actually in one of the sites we considered when we originally did the rink. A little bit flatter. We did have to bring in a little bit of topsoil to make sure it was flat, but we were able to do that. And what's really pretty cool and pretty neat that we've been able to do is establish a working relationship with the YMCA as well as the Recreation Department through the school district. Jenny from our staff has been working with staff from both the Recreation Department and the YMCA on some programming that they're planning for on the rink. So once the rink does open, you will see a number of programs offered weekly. They're also working with Dr. Eric's Skate Club. Dr. Eric has a number of skates that I believe the YMCA, he gets from the YMCA through purchase or donations or however that works. But he has a trailer full of skates that he makes available to the public. And so Jenny and the other staff have been working with Dr. Eric, and he's going to make those skates available on certain days at the rink as well. So I think it's going to be a good move to have it down closer to the YMCA for some future programming improvements in the future. But for this year, again, just getting it up and operating on more of a level surface. So we're going to wait and see how the weather does. Our goal is to try to get it open typically between the holiday of Christmas and New Year's, but it's all weather dependent. And so we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep an eye on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and we'll see announcements there as far as when it might be open. The other item I wanted to give you a quick update on is the West Haven Circle Park ball diamond. That renovation project was included in our 2020 CIP. We started the design process with Rettler Corporation on that. We got too far into the fall months here, so Chad and I are working with Rettler to finalize those bid specs. We actually had a meeting today and looking to finalize and put that out for bid in January, and then have that work begin in early spring to have that ball field renovated. And you'll see it, it's the similar type plan that we've had with our other recent ball fields, replacing the backstop, getting new players' benches, fencing, and getting concrete in certain areas to reduce the maintenance and wear and tear. So that ball field will be out of commission for next summer, but I think Chad is comfortable with, the Rainbow Memorial Ball Field and Spanbauer recent improvements, that we have enough fields that we'll be able to accommodate everybody. So those are two of the bigger projects right now. I don't have it on the agenda, but I want to quickly throw it in there that the 5-year CIP for the city was approved, and the CIP funding for next year was approved. And I'm excited to say that our building renovation, a new building project, was included in the CIP. So we'll be starting to design our new park operations and administration building after the first of the year as well. So all excitement.
Yay.
Hey, this rink, is it the intention that will be available in between programming for the public to use when there's not programming?
The rink will be open during park hours, yes. There's only, what we're doing is we're trying to add more programs down there to make more use out of it. And we're also working again to have skates available for those who might not have access to ice skating. So I would say 95% of the time it's free open skate other than a couple times on either Fridays or weekends when there might be a program. And again, everybody's encouraged to attend. There's no fees and charges for that. So.
And there was a question from someone in the community asking whether there would be, I don't know what they're called, those little supports that beginning skaters use that they kind of scoot along with. I know that's at the YMCA ice rink, but that was just kind of a question that came up.
I don't know. I can pass that along to Jenny and see if Dr. Eric might have that as part of his inventory as well. Amy, that's all I have. Sure, thank you. I'm done, Amy.
All right, thank you, Ray. Chad?
Yeah, just a couple of updates for you. If you've noticed maybe over the past couple of weeks, there was the historic light pillars at South Park on the corner of Ohio and South Park next to the annual flower bed there had some stonework that was really deteriorating. So those were all reconstructed, remortared through there. So hopefully the longevity for those historic monuments will hold now going into the future. So that was a nice uplift for that corner. Second thing, just to keep people aware that annually we go through out at Rouge Park to mow the prairie areas and things of that nature to help keep the invasives down. And we actually are going to be starting that here today. Was our goal to start today out there and hopefully have done for the end of the week. So if you see some mowing, it's select mowing to retain certain species out there, make things work out. So if you see the activity, you'll know what's happening there. Also with the Lakeshore movement with the facility down there and the old maintenance building, we have things in order for raising that with our permit process and abatements and everything cleared, and planning on looking at next spring when after building designs are complete and the bid process out there that we can go and get that building out in advance for construction. So it will be there throughout the course of the winter. All the utilities are disconnected from there. We might use it for some dry winter storage, but very minimal. We're trying to clean all the contents out of that facility. So, but it will remain through the winter months at this time. So those are only brief updates I have right now. And if you have any questions, I can take those.
All right, I'm guessing there aren't any questions by the looks of things. Is there any other business? All right, then I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who made the second? I'm sorry.
Becky.
Becky. Thank you. That's why I didn't see your mouth move. All right, I will take roll call then for dismissal since we are doing the virtual. Bartels.
Aye.
Davis.
Aye.
Dirth.
Aye.
Broyle.
Aye.
Hudak.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Metz.
Aye.
Millet.
Aye.
And it looks like Palmieri, we might have lost the mayor, looks like. But even still, we have enough, 8-0, to call the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Happy
everybody.
holidays.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Take care.
Bye.